Getting the early numbers could be the key to success when betting on the NFL. That's why we're here to react to the Pinnacle openers and analyse where the market might move. Welcome to the opening line. Welcome to another episode of the opening line. Apologies for cancelling last week's show, but we are back. We're ready to take a look at the Week 10 numbers in the NFL and, of course, get some expert insight from our guests. Andy Molitor, Eric Eager and Rufus Peabody are with me. Rufus, I'm going to start with you in terms of our little look back. How was the last week for you?
Oh, Carlos Ortiz. No, the last week it was good. It was good. I think I was plus 2 units for the NFL and second half were as well. Jets. I said before that I wasn't on the Jets except we had look aheads and my buddy had my business partner had bet them, just assuming that the 7.5 was going to be good and where you might get to 7. But won on that, so that was nice. Saints won. I was wrong on Arizona though. That was a big position that did not pay off. What else did I have? I had Minnesota, which won, and there was something else that mixed in there somewhere. But San Francisco lost. It's a good week. Good week. How about you guys?
Yeah, Andy, how was your week 9?
Probably maybe my best week. I'd have to go back and look. I've had a lot of middling weeks where it's like, I lost like 0.8 units or just barely scrape by or break even, juiced out. But I think it was 5-2. The cap off was the second leg of the teaser with New England last night. Down 10, wasn't looking like it was going to be as big of a week, so it was nice to catch that. Plus, we took some New England second half, just not even New England second half, just New England to win the game outright rather than laying the minus 7.5 last night. So it was blessed up by our best friend Adam Gase losing that game for us. That was a nice finish to it. It's always winning the second half bet on Monday night makes any week feel a lot better than it even was. So
your big tuna teaser.
Oh, it came through.
It came through. Yeah, that was a bit of a sweat, but yeah, it was an okay. The game that really tilted me was the Chicago-Tennessee game. I figured that Tennessee's defense would be bad enough for Chicago to get some run. But as some will say, defense doesn't matter when the offense can't execute anything. So that was the one that stood out to me as being particularly bad.
All right, let's get started straight into week 10. We've got Thursday night football, Indianapolis Colts at the Tennessee Titans. Pinnacle opened this one minus 2.5 on Tennessee, 50.5 point total. A little bit of a move on Indianapolis. It's dropped down to the 2. The total's also dropped down to 49. Probably a good one to get us going here, I think. Who wants to kick us off with their thoughts?
My numbers have just the slightest, what are we at right now? Is it still Indy or Tennessee? It's Tennessee, minus 2? I make it like a pick 'em, so there's some value on Indy, but at the same time, that's not adjusting for the injuries. So it's probably stay away. Indy's rough when they're missing some pieces on defense. And even though I was really kind of disappointed in Tennessee's play against the Patriots, I had that over. I'm baffled at what happened on both sides of the ball for the most part. Tannehill had a bad day against a good defense. I guess that's what we're going to call it. So pretty much a stay away. The total, I'm probably staying away from Tennessee totals from now. I don't have my totals completely run, but that's probably where I'd make it too. Probably be sitting out and just playing some second half Thursday night football.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the Colts in a teaser. Especially when it was 2.5 earlier. I think the total's probably exactly where it needs to be because in, the Tennessee during Tannehill's first 20 starts or something like 15-5 on overs, and then what we're seeing of late is Derrick Henry is not explosive anymore. The run game is the run game. As it is for most teams after you sort of allow noise to dampen off. And what Tennessee wants to do is run the football on first and second downs. I think the Colts in a perfect world also want to do that. And that's just not really conducive to playing over football. But at the same time, both teams, Phillip Rivers has actually played okay this year, and Ryan Tannehill's really good. So do you really want to bet the under either if this game gets out, if either team gets up or down 14, then, I think an over shot. So I think I played the Colts in like 3 teasers early in the week when it was 2.5. A little bit of value lost now that's 2, but not enough to not play it if you like that side in a teaser.
Yeah, I showed both teams coming off of poor games. Tennessee graded out number 20 in game grades last week. Indianapolis 24. Tennessee once again was on the right side of the turnover margin, and now they're number 1 in the NFL in turnover EPA. They've gained 40 points versus the average team in turnovers. They've actually gained 90 points relative to the Cowboys on turnovers this year, which is just an astounding number to me. Cowboys are last by a whole 23 points, but I don't have an opinion here. I make the line 2.7, so complete stay away from me.
Cool. Let's move on then to
Hilton
next.
and Leonard. I mean, are maybe in, maybe out. It's too early at this point to be grabbing too much exposure on Indy. If they're both in, I'd take Indy, I guess, and I might.
Do you guys both have exposure on Tennessee to win the AFC South, right?
I have some Tennessee futures. I'm not sure what. I have some like win the AFC. I may have AFC South. They were as I said, them and Pittsburgh are like teams that I felt like I shouldn't have liked overs on going into the season, but I did. I mean, the Jets is a team that I also liked overs on, so
Yeah, I think in the preseason, I probably, as far as division futures, I have the most on the Titans, I think, as any other team because they were going off at like 170 early on. And then even they won some games kind of poorly, early in the year, and they were still being offered above even money. And the Colts kind of looked rough. So I even took a little bit. I think after week 1, I think I took some Tennessee plus 125 to win the AFC South. And over 8.5, over 9. I think that might be, if you're sitting in that position, it might be something of a hedge to some sort of take Indianapolis here. I just, don't know. I just don't think that there's a viable way to do that other than like I said, Colts in a teaser, just because I don't think there's value on Indianapolis in this particular game.
Is that do you find yourself in that position now as we're getting to that point in the season where you're thinking about potential futures you've got and what it might mean for matchups like this? Is that a unique instance, or is that quite a common occurrence as we get into sort of week 8, 9, and 10?
Think about Sunday night. Like if you had Saints exposure, or Tampa for that matter, massive game. Like that's a massive bump for the Saints now to have the sweep. I have some Saints exposure. I didn't actually have any Tennessee. Drew did. That was like he planted his flag in Tennessee. I put mine in Pittsburgh preseason. So that's combined. Somebody's probably going to make some money on some division or AFC futures, or at least something. But yeah, my Saints futures were taken prior to the Brady signing, and then everything else in the awesome draft by Tampa Bay. So not only am I married to the Saints more than I like, I'm married to them at bad numbers. So that kept me from, a lot of people had some good takes on why I should get more involved in the Saints on Sunday night, and I just couldn't do it because I'm already sitting there. And it sucks how you have to kind of manage yourself that way. And there's a positive position you should probably be adding to.
Honestly, I mean, I have a lot of Saints exposure and future stuff, I think, but I still took the Saints. I don't think about it until like the AFC Championship generally. I tend to, if I have, I'll probably look in a few weeks and actually look at what my positions are, or when we're coming down to the last few weeks of the season. But I'm not going to take a bet or lay off. I'm not going to take a negative EV bet just to hedge, and I'm not going to lay off, or I'm not going to lay off a bet that I think is good to avoid exposure, because I bet I stake fairly conservatively relative to my bankroll. So I'm not really, in a position where I like to say I'm willing to eat the variance and just to have more expected value.
All right, well, I'll get us on to the next game on the board. I think we've got the Steelers down, so we'll get on to Houston Texans at the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland's got the 3 after opening up at -2.5. I think you're going to expect a pretty big total on this one. It's a 53. Maybe started a little bit too big as a 54 to start with. This one, I don't know if you guys have got any news or if there's been any latest developments of what's going on with Mayfield. I don't think there's any confirmation. Consensus seems that he's going to play despite being on the COVID list. Eric, I'll go over to you. Is it one here side or total that interests you?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now with Houston catching 3 and it being plus 104, I mean, I think that there's probably some value on Houston here. I know Cleveland's coming off of a bye. I know Houston, looked kind of sketchy against a kind of a live Jacksonville team last week. But when you look at how Deshaun Watson's played, he is sneakily one of the top 5 to 8 quarterbacks in the NFL going right now. And, if he catches fire in this game, I mean, he's a significantly better proposition than Baker Mayfield. And Cleveland's defense has really, has struggled so far this year. So even though it's a cool story that Cleveland's 5-3, it's a disappointment that Houston is where they are, I believe, at 2-6. Like, I think that there's some value here on Houston, on the road here.
My numbers might not be adjusting enough for strength of schedule on Houston. They have had a tough schedule, especially early on. I'm showing value on Cleveland. I'm close to betting Cleveland. The Baker stuff scares me a little, but at the same time, I feel like it's just similar to a lot of these, like the Stafford situation where he was in contact. They're just going to end up playing him. It would be awful to get your hands stuck in the cookie jar if they end up. I mean, what's our backup there?
Case Keenum?
Is it Case
Yeah.
Keenum? Is that bad? I don't even know.
No, that's not that bad.
I'm not even like a big Baker fan. I'm fully, running backs don't matter, whatever. Don't ever pay a running back, but at the same time, Chubb helps. He practiced today. That's big. And Houston, you can say it was a really tough schedule, but in the end, if you're gonna have a game come down to a 2-point conversion versus Drew calls him Juice Luton because he can't remember his name ever. Which, I mean, I would tell you that's a golfer. Like,
Yeah,
it was a bad result. I would be curious to what Rufus's game grade was for Houston because I didn't watch a ton of that game, but I can't imagine it was very good. And from what I've done in the box score so far, it was just like an ugly win over an ugly team.
I didn't watch a single minute of it. I actually had them number 14 of 28, so slightly positive, but no, I think I'm with Eric on this one. I kind of lean towards Houston a little bit. I'm just low on Cleveland. I think I have them rated as the worst defense in football. I've probably been a little bit high on Houston throughout the year because of Deshaun Watson. I mean, that's something that you can't. It's hard to replicate having a Deshaun Watson at quarterback. There's a lot of value there, but I make the number only about a point. So I'm not on it right now. It was 2.5, I think, yesterday, and my time has been spent on master stuff. But I may take a bite at 3, and definitely if it gets higher than that.
Yeah, it was a game I also had in a teaser with Indy when it was 2.5. I know that sort of the variance is higher with the total being what it is, but I think Watson, even in some of his, the poorer games that they've had in Houston, he's kept games close. And I think, even, especially if we get weather in this game, like we did 2 weeks ago in Cleveland, I don't think we will, but again, that'll shrink the variance a little bit. And I just think, part of the reason, Rufus, why you might be on, like Houston a little bit more is just like the unpredictability of defense. Like they've been atrocious at defense, and for example, Dallas was terrible in defense for the first 6 weeks of the season. The last 3 weeks, they've been somewhat representable at it, and then so the question becomes, okay, like how bad is their defense versus what are we going to get out of Mayfield? I think the Mayfield matters a lot more than Houston's defense, and without Odell and with an offensive line that's a little bit banged up, we might get a little bit better performance out of Romeo Crennel's group than we're used to.
The Cowboys lock Mike Nolan in a closet or something. I think that's the only explanation.
That was the most curious, I would say, addition of an assistant coach in the NFL this year. I don't know what he's done to deserve that job.
It's loyalty. It's the fact that personal relationships.
Yeah.
And what is Norv Turner's son?
What
did Norv Turner's son do to deserve the offensive coordinator job in Washington?
Yeah, the number of unique last names on the Washington coaching staff is strictly less than the number of available coaches spots.
Just to get back to this, I suppose generally the Mayfield thing on the COVID list is interesting. I'd like to get your guys' opinion on how you approach it. I mean, some people, limits wise, are forced to kind of wait till later in the week where some of these things are more known. Some bettors, the real rec guys, might just wait until the end of the week anyway. But you've got a kind of sample of people in the middle that will be getting their action down around this point in the week. So this season, have you had to deal with much of that in terms of decision making and extra research into injuries or COVID reserve lists, whatever it might be?
You have to treat it like an injury, don't you? As far as if you feel like you might miss out on a good number, you have to just, I suppose, assign a probability like you do with if there's a star player and he's probable and you think he'll play. I think it comes down to everyone's risk tolerance. Like if you're willing to fire on that, saying like 85% chance I think he plays, and if I get burnt on it, I don't think I get burnt on it enough times for it to matter over the long run. Kind of the same thing on COVID stuff. It is just an injury in my mind. Like Baker Mayfield, in my mind, he's probable. Whereas some of these other guys, when they actually test positive, they say we have a positive test. He's on whatever. Same thing. It's like concussion protocol. I guess some of it is there's a little goofiness to it. Like Allen Robinson playing the other week. I'm just out of the blue, like, oh, he's fine now. Concussion's gone. He's in. So I think you kind of take your life into your own hands on this, and you have to weigh your risk tolerance on a lot of it, depending on what time of week you want to bet too.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's probably the hardest part is that injuries are nonlinear, right? Like the number, the effect of two defensive backs is bigger than 2 times 1 defensive back. And I think COVID has that knock-on effect in spades, right? In the sense that you look at Baltimore last week, and I think I could be wrong. I think some of the line movement later in the week was this idea that Marlon Humphrey's COVID test also impacted 7 other players, and obviously that's humongous. We saw what happened in San Francisco, but then of course late in the week, those 6 players that were in contact with Humphrey end up being able to play. And so then it's just really one injury for Baltimore, and it doesn't end up being that big of a deal. So I think it's on a case by case basis, which obviously, for people like us that do modeling, it's that's not great, right? That's not that sort of is one of those where you have to add your sort of human aspect to it, which generally speaking, we overreact to things.
All right, then. Well, let's move on to Jacksonville Jaguars. They're traveling to Green Bay Packers. Packers are 14-point favorites. Total currently sitting at 52. It doesn't look like there's much interest in it from a betting perspective. It's always a tough one when the handicap gets that big, I guess. But I mean, Green Bay have had it pretty easy. It's another one they obviously should win. Some doubts hanging them over maybe at a 14-point handicap, though. What do you think, Andy? Too big? Juice Luton going to do the business?
Yeah, Juice Luton. I'm going to call him that for the rest of his career now. Hopefully who knows, it might be long. He actually didn't look terrible, but Green Bay, a little extra rest off Thursday night. Honestly, Adams might be the best receiver in the league. That's such a good combo right now. It just doesn't matter. Kills everybody. They get Lazard back. They get Jamal Williams back. I'm not sure the defense is as bad as we saw versus Minnesota. I'm not sure Minnesota's run game is as good as we've saw the last 2 weeks when we get to that. But at the same time, yeah, hard stay away game, high variance. My number makes it 13.5. So I don't want to bet this one. I probably won't watch it. This is for, I guess, maybe some live betting opportunities in here if you get some weirdness like an early Jacksonville score like happened against Houston. Although that box score didn't go how I thought that game would go either, to be fair.
Yeah, I make it 4. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, me? Okay.
Either or.
No, I actually make it 16, surprisingly. I mean, you're right. I'm Juice Luton, since he didn't, or Yost Loughton or whatever, since he didn't make it into the Masters, he signed with the Jaguars. And he actually put up an above average game grade, at least, or the Jacksonville offense did. But Green Bay played very, very well last week. Yeah, coming off the extra rest. And still this guy's second start, if he's starting, and where he was drafted and all that, basically one game isn't going to do a lot to sort of move the needle there. So it's more just a play against Jacksonville than anything. But I'm not betting it. I mean, 16 is, especially in those high ranges, like, that's like my linear number, which is going to be very, when you get high enough, it becomes a game of sort of diminishing returns because a team may not be, incentivized the same way at the end of the game.
Do you have kind of brackets, Rufus, that you'll look at in terms of handicap marks that once it gets to a certain point, you kind of think it's too high, even though it might be a good number?
So basically what I do is I fit the entire distribution. So my number is 16, like my mean projection is 16. That's not necessarily going to be the median. And basically it's, I can say, okay, this is how much, it's 0.7% to land on 16 or whatever, and basically I just fit out the whole distribution there.
And Eric, what about you? Too big at 14?
Yeah, we're sort of the same way. We project out the distribution, and so like our number, I think, is like a little higher than 14, but just given like the historical way that things have worked out here, like there's not a ton of value. For much of the reasons Rufus said, there's just not. For example, Green Bay's defense, I don't think is necessarily good enough to hang on to a lead, that big reliably, but also Jacksonville's offense is sort of good in a lot of the ways that Green Bay's defense is bad, namely that their running game is actually fairly strong. So this is just one where you sort of lay off of it. I think, I wouldn't be surprised if Jacksonville gave Green Bay a game, especially if, it was, you had weather similar to the other day where they lost to Minnesota, but it's just not. The Jacksonville Jaguars are just not reliably good enough to hang, I think, with a team in Green Bay that I think is, most people have in the top 8 to 5, in power rankings.
All right, then Philadelphia Eagles at the New York Giants is next. It looks like people like the Eagles at -3. They took them out to -3.5. I don't think it's going to get any further. Probably even settle back at the 3. More money on the total, if anything, with this one. 41 up to 44.5. It's still trending upwards as well. It's probably not going to be a good game. We had it a couple of weeks back. It was a close one then. I think the Giants look a little bit better than they did back then. Has anyone got a vested interest in this, or is it something that the numbers make it interesting?
I mean, I think I don't have a bet on it. I lean Eagles, if anything. I make it just over 4. But the Giants, I don't think have been playing that well. They were +5. If my numbers are correct, they were +5 turnover margin last week. I didn't watch the game, so I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm surprised. But
there's a stat about that. If you look at, and I know you do, and I really like your stat where you do turnover, turning it into what expected points or however you're doing things there, or points gained. But
turnover EPA.
Yeah, turnover EPA. I could not spit it out. The Giants, if you look at just like a turnovers forced or like takeaways, they're second in the league. Tied for second in the league with 15 turnovers, but 7 of those are against Washington. So does it really count? So it's just kind of a weird situation where you look at some of these stats versus who they played. I mean, you didn't miss much watching this game. I watched the fumble like 6 times. That was hilarious.
What was the fumble?
It was like 100 people trying to catch a greased hog. Thing just kept squirting out. The only like positive from this game, I like Ingram a lot, man. The guy kind of has the dropsies, but if he could get over that and get on a good team with a good quarterback, he's like a top 5 tight end. Otherwise, my numbers make this. I don't know. I can check. I don't think I bet this. I certainly didn't. I know some people who took the early numbers on the Eagles, got a decent number. I make it kind of nuts on. I don't show a ton of value here. You get some rest advantage, I guess, but at the same time, I'm not interested in getting in bed with either of these offenses right now.
Well, Andy, the stat that I saw that's amazing is that Daniel Jones is 4-0 against the Redskins and 1-17 against the rest of the NFL.
And not only that, he's 0-17 in his last 17 starts against non-Washington teams because he won his first career start against Tampa in a game where Bruce Arians backed his kicker up because he thought it gave him a better chance.
Oh God!
Remember that.
Alex Smith actually was pretty competent on Sunday, other than throwing interceptions. So like he moved the football. I think his yards per attempt were over 10. They couldn't cover Terry McLaurin. Now, I like our numbers like the Eagles too. I think my issue is just how badly Carson Wentz has played this year. Like, he made Dallas's defense look representable 2 Sunday nights ago. When I look at him, like, he's still like 20% of his passes are negatively graded. 6% of his passes are turnover worthy. Like, you just can't win with that kind of performance at the QB position. So I wonder how they'll do. I mean, they really struggled with the Giants at home just a couple weeks ago. I'd be interested to see. I mean, if people have Eagles futures, like, I can see why, but I don't know who's going to win the NFC East. To me, it's a complete mystery at this point.
I grabbed some Giants.
Back.
I mean, I took Giants like 16-1 or something at some point this season, where I was like, I feel like they do have some upside, right?
Yeah, their quarter. This is a hot take, but Daniel Jones is playing better than Carson Wentz. Like, neither is playing well, but Daniel Jones is throwing way fewer turnover-worthy plays. Like, the receivers are better. Like, and he played better in that Thursday night game. It's just, Wentz had a nice little stretch in the last like 4 or 5 minutes of the game, but like, there's really no fundamental reason to look at Philly and say this is a lock to win the NFC East, even though the markets have them at over, I believe, minus 300 to win it. It's just that they happen to have the best record currently.
And Dallas, I mean, if you look at, Dallas they haven't been good, but they've been so unfortunate. As I said with that, I mean, they're negative 14 in turnover differential, and like, they're an outlier in terms of how far behind they are the rest of the league they are in terms of the effect of those turnovers in terms of expected points. So you can't forget that. They've lost 48 expected points on offensive fumbles.
And you look at the Eagles, the next bunch of games, they're at Giants, which is not a sure thing, at Browns, home to Seahawks, at Packers, home to Saints, at Cardinals. I mean, that's 6 games where, this is the only one of those games where they're going to be favored. And it's just, I'm struggling to see again why, and I'm not trying to turn this into a futures discussion, but I'm not really, I don't know if there's a reason why the Eagles should be well regarded in the NFC East other than the division is so bad, but it's not like Washington or the Giants don't have value right now.
Well, the Eagles have also been really banged up though, and they're getting some guys back. I mean, that's mostly
there is talk of Lane Johnson being back. Like, if they got healthy, I'm not going to say they'd be good, but by attrition, they should win this division, which is, it's such a weird deal.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And now we're talking about going to 8 teams and possibly just seeding by record or something along those lines, which I don't know if they're doing that just because of this NFC East or if they're trying to do some bubble stuff later in the season, but it'll be very interesting to see.
If you look at just accuracy throwing the football, like, Carson Wentz is in a cluster with like Sam Darnold, Garrett Gilbert. Nick Foles has been more accurate than him this year. Lamar Jackson, who's been really bad, in many ways this year, has been way more accurate. Like, he's just like, you could put anybody, but he's just not accurate throwing the football right now. And like, can you really sustainably? Can they cross the street this many times and not get hit by a car? Like, I don't know. I'm worried about them as far as like, it might just be that 6 wins is good enough to get in, and so then they beat the Cowboys and the football team, and then win one of these next 6 games, and they're probably fine. But I don't know.
Who do you take if you think the Eagles could not be, or there's value elsewhere, Eric?
I'm going to go with Rufus's favorite team. If Alex Smith's not great, but I feel like, their defense rounds into form and Alex Smith takes care of the football the way he did in Kansas City. They have enough weapons on offense, I think, to at least like lean into, the rest of the season and get to 6-7 wins.
When you said Rufus's team, I was like, are they moving the Jets to the division? Just to make it like, well. The Jets deserve to be in the NFC East, I think.
Yeah, they're honorary NFC East team.
All right, well, let's move on. We got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Carolina Panthers next. Tampa Bay clear favourites, -5. Got a pretty even split on the current total as well at 50.5. Probably another one where there's not going to be a lot of there isn't a lot of betting interest in it at the moment. I don't think there's going to be a lot of interest kind of full stop in terms of people watching it anyway. But more importantly for people listening, is there any angles here that you guys can see or anything at the numbers that make it interesting?
Tampa, Carolina, I think is going to be, I personally, I think that should be an interesting game to watch. I think Carolina is fun to watch right now. And what I want to know from you guys is how much you adjusted Tampa based on their game, and for that matter, how much you adjusted the Saints based on that game last week, which, by the way, I had it as the Saints were the top graded team, or their performance was the best graded performance of the year, and Tampa's was the worst of the year. So
the 1 week you didn't bet on them, Rufus, or
the Saints?
Yeah.
Oh, I bet on them. I bet on the Saints.
That Steam is certainly something.
I was just like, wow, the market has not been liking me on the Saints stuff, and I'm like 3 points of line value. But I mean, that's probably Michael Thomas is part of that, right?
I had the Saints team total over 23, and I've never just kicked back so nice. It was so nice. It's just good to get an easy one sometimes. That felt good. I had a little bit of Saints after everybody talked me into taking some. I didn't even get a good number. I just took some 4.5. I was mad when they fumbled inside the 5. I'm like, man, if this cost me. And then obviously you saw the rest of the first half. It was just hilarious. My downgrade / upgrade for these two teams, I tried to temper it a little because I don't think you should go nuts on one game in the middle of the season when we're starting to kind of wash out some of the priors to begin with. Marpet, whatever, that was a thing, I guess. And I guess, how do you feel about the Carolina pass rush? Because Brady has no mobility. If you're missing an important piece on the offensive line and you can pressure him, I guess maybe it doesn't matter if you have, 3 all-pro receivers. It was really, really awful to watch that offense. Just how many 3 and outs was that in the first quarter there? My downgrade was significant because I had Tampa very high, I guess. But at the same time, I didn't go nuts with this. Carolina, that was another one we liked over. We liked the team total over for Carolina. That got a little sweatier than I thought it would after 17 in the first half. But I have this at 5.5. So I guess small lean to Tampa even after the downgrade, just because I'm not super keen on some things that we see out of Carolina. Everybody, it was big DJ Moore, big Robbie Anderson, but now it's like the Samuel show. They have like 3 legitimate receivers now, and Teddy doesn't kill you. He's just not going to make the big mistake and lose you a game, but at the same time, they don't have the coverage to beat someone like KC.
Andy, I'm not surprised, given your background, that you're getting all political and dodging my question of like what your adjustment was on Tampa.
I'd have to.
Oh, you don't have a number
different screen. Okay. I had him like second or third, and now they've again. That's relative. That's not power numbers.
Are we talking a point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points? I mean, just if you had to ballpark it.
Let's look. 1.5. I think I'd have to go back and look at the old saved sheet, but 1.5. I didn't want to go nuts with that, and maybe I'll be worse for it, but I probably won't bet this game, so it won't really hurt me, I guess.
Yeah, I lean Tampa despite the fact that my power ranking for Tampa moved down about 1.5, 2 points based on that game. Just because not only were they like bludgeoned, they were like fundamentally so. And then, as I've talked about earlier, like I'm moving things a little bit faster on game, because I held tightly to my priors early in the season, and then I think I've like held less tightly to them as the season has progressed. So I don't know, but at the same time, I still I would probably make this game more around 7, just because I think Carolina did a lot of things on Sunday that were reminiscent. Like they're basically a very gutty team that pulled out all the stops, got relatively lucky on a bunch of things, and gave Kansas City a really good game. I don't necessarily know if they'll have much left for this game, especially considering it's sort of the second time around for a good defense against a quarterback who I think is good but not great.
All right, well, I'll get us onto the Denver Broncos at the Las Vegas Raiders. Another one that's yet to see much in the market. I think some of the later games are clearly interesting bettors here, but it's currently Raiders at -5, 51.5 on the total. I guess you can see why people like the Raiders, but it's hard to see it moving anymore. And maybe one where the simple recipe of poor defense, pretty efficient offense is going to see the total bumped up as well. Andy, what are your thoughts on this one?
My side, I guess my numbers made it -4.4, and when I looked at it yesterday, it was 4.5. So I didn't take too long to look at that. What's the total at now? What are we looking at there?
51.5, I think.
Yeah. Shaded over.
Shelby. Yeah, I have some over in this one at like 50.5. We got some early numbers on Sunday. Just thought that was a little low. I would hope it keeps ticking up. Although Denver is a bit of an enigma. They could have so many good. This is another one like we just talked about with Carolina. Like down the road, Judy, Sutton, Hamler, this Patrick guy. I don't know if they have the answer in Drew Lock. I lean no. It sucks about the ACL tier for Albert O too, but this is such a weird team who is just magnificent in garbage time. Like multiple fourth quarters with 3 scores now. So it's not going to work for a team like this when you have a bad pass D. It doesn't matter what you can do against the run because it's 2020 for the Broncos. So I'm not betting this, but obviously I'd lean a little bit towards Denver, which sucks. I'm not doing that.
Yeah. I think Denver's like the only side here, although again, like it's going to be like, does Drew Lock have to do the same thing every game, which is to play terribly in the first 3 quarters and then try to get through the back door here? The Raiders are not that good defensively, so that might be available to him, but it's just tough because Lock has been, one of the worst quarterbacks in all of football. I mean, he has a worse grade, I believe, than Carson Wentz. A lot of that's due to average depth of target, but like for somebody who has an average depth of target over 10 yards, he's not generating positive plays at the rate of any, but literally like he has an ADOT like Jameis, but he doesn't generate positive plays like Jameis does. So it's sort of annoying, I would say, especially given that they have some talent on the outside.
With
do you set this you set the first half line at Vegas -11? Full game -5. What are we doing? And that's just like, are we overthinking this? Should you just take a little bit of Oakland first half or Las Vegas first half? Either or.
On the garbage time thing, Andy, is that something that, or any of you, like, how do you build that in? Is it something where teams develop that trend, or is it just something where it's kind of so volatile and it's something that just it's going to happen throughout the league or for certain teams, and you have to make of it what it is?
Likely not predictive, right?
Yeah, it's not.
I have a situational where it's
right now.
Yeah, low leverage situations get de-weighted based on their predictive value in the future.
So, yeah, it's a bad team.
Simple as that. All right, well, next up we've got Buffalo Bills traveling to the Arizona Cardinals, hovering between -1 and -2 on Arizona. It's probably not going to get to the 3, but maybe as we get later into the week, or people might even buy back on the Bills. But for now, it looks pretty steady. Another one where the market likes the over, 52 up to 56. It's still actually the over that's seeing the most action as well. I think it's fair to say Murray's had his doubters. He's looking pretty decent now. The Bills are running away a bit in the AFC East, but they haven't really had much to beat. The odds suggest, I guess, a case can be made for either side. Eric, who are you siding with?
Yeah, I like the over on the way up at 54 was where I got it. So it kind of in the middle of where it currently was and where it started. Murray has sort of won me over a little bit. He's clearly, he's running with a purpose, which is something that he wasn't doing early in the year, which I think is terrific. He's, I think in the intermediate part of the field getting a lot better. And then his support has been terrific. You've seen Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald complement DeAndre Hopkins quite well. So I think they'll put up their part of the bargain on offense. Bills defense is not good, which is, sort of different than what we've seen from them over the past, 2-3 years when they've been competitive under Sean McDermott. But Josh Allen is sort of Josh Allen is playing, in such a way where not only is he playing very well, but the Bills are putting him in a position to succeed. They are not running the ball on early downs. They are putting the ball in his hands and asking him to make plays. And while I don't know if it's the most sustainable thing in the world, it's something that I think the Bills are doing to sort of give themselves the best chance to win. So when I see two teams that I'm fairly confident that they're going to give themselves the best chance to win through throwing the football, the over, I don't have much hesitation. As far as the side's concerned, I probably would lean Buffalo here, but that's only because, I think that they're slightly better offense and both defenses are kind of bad.
What about you, Andy? Either way?
I took the over. You know what? I bet over 52.5, which was fun until I hit submit and it jumped to 53.5, which is just the worst feeling, being like a few seconds late, apparently. Or, Drew and I bet at the same time. He hit submit first, I guess, and I caught the worst end of that deal. So I like this
54.
over. It's still a decent number. Same thing. I think it was 7 sacks the Bills gave up.
Mm-hmm.
They have had some offensive line issues, and that's going to continue. But I'm still not a huge believer in the Cardinals' defense as a whole, nor especially their pass rush. I had Miami. I didn't get the best of the number because of the late steam. I guess it was unwavering. I'm not even 100% sure if I got the right side there. That game was very hard to grade. I mean, you can grade it out however you want. It's hard to determine, based on some bad calls by both coaches late, who should have actually won that game. My big takeaway was I'm glad Tua played well, because 2 weeks ago we didn't get to see much of him based on how the game went with all the essentially defensive scores. He didn't have to do anything. They just went into turtle mode and played to get the game over with. So it was nice to see him passing at a decent level. I don't know if he's going to be a superstar. It's like Eric Oz says, it was encourageable. It was encourageable. Or encouraging. Encourageable is a whole different thing.
It's better than incorrigible.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm happy that Tua played well. I think this who'd they lose? Preston Williams. That's looking like a multi-week thing, but at the same time, it's not like they had a lot they were working with for Miami. I'm getting under the wrong team anyway. We're talking about Arizona. Kyler is dangerous with his legs. I like to read the local stuff, like the local reporters. If you get on like SB Nation or some of that stuff, and they seem to think that Kyler doesn't like Hopkins because he skips a lot of practices. And he only did get 3 targets, so I guess it's good that all these other receivers are showing up. And yeah, it's a fun offense when it's working. He proved me wrong. I didn't think his passing was going to look that good against Miami, but again, they were calling it pretty tight against Howard. I thought some of that was kind of horseshit.
Well, you had 3 penalties. The Dolphins coming into the game when Howard, Igbenogany, and Jones were all playing. I don't believe gave up a pass that traveled more than 15 yards in the air, which was taken apart by Arizona. I think that was a plus performance by their offense.
So you've got over. Is it a full house at Rufus?
I made the total a little over 54, so I didn't play it, and I make the spread Arizona minus -1.5. So, like most of the board this week, I don't have a play.
Is it? I mean, that's an interesting one. Is it something that, as the season goes on, historically, do you find it more different? Are your numbers more off as we get further into the season, or is it just a bad week in terms of your numbers against the market? Do you think?
I think edges get smaller as the season goes on. Everybody gets tighter. I mean, early in the season, there's a lot speculative. You don't really know because you haven't seen a team for very long. I do think there are opportunities late in the season when the market kind of overreacts to a team. And I think in the past, maybe like Tampa would have gotten downgraded more than they should, or the Saints would have gotten upgraded more than they should like 10 years ago. And there'd be some opportunities fading that. But these days, I mean, the thing is my model gets sharper, the market gets sharper. And so I always find, and not just in the NFL, across sports, that there are more opportunities early in the season.
All right, then. So I'll move us on. We got Seattle Seahawks at the LA Rams. We've got the Rams at -2. Fairly hefty total again, 55.5. Not much movement yet, but this one's probably going to be a standout game for a lot of people. So I think we will see a fair bit coming in late on as well. Interesting to see the Rams favoured here, 5-3 at the moment. Some people may say that's a little bit deceiving as well, but the Seahawks themselves are coming off a disappointing result. They're scoring points for fun. What do you think of this one, Eric?
I'd probably want to wait until if it ever gets to, Seattle +3, but I think I can't lay the Rams here just because I think their offense doesn't do enough, especially in games where they're behind, and there's, a pretty good chance that they'll be behind against Seattle, who has a really good offense. I also like to sort of fade, people overreacting to defense. Like I think that the Buffalo Bills put together a brilliant offensive game plan, against a team in Seattle, and they only play once every 4 years, right? And so there's less of a familiarity there. There's a ton of familiarity here between the Seahawks and the Rams, and so I don't know. I think people are backing LA because off of a bye and everything, but also based upon Seattle's defense looking terrible even after getting Jamal Adams back. Like I kind of think defense tends to sort of oscillate around a mean, and we might be catching Seattle sort of at their low point here.
I didn't realize how high I had Los Angeles rated because they were on a bye, I guess. When I looked at these numbers initially, and I have just been in love with Seattle because I love this good offense, but boy, apparently it probably does come down to McVay, this entire game, what he can put together, because it's a beatable defense if you put together the right game. Maybe he should just come out today and talk about how good all the running backs are playing in practice and how they're going to beat this team into the ground with the running backs and then just throw the ball 60 times. Because apparently Carroll's too big of a moron to realize that, you can't just be one-dimensional on defense. I mean, they got shredded. So I make the number very close to where it's at. I might be laying off just betting the Seahawks every week like I have been. But, I don't like getting in bed with the Rams too much, even though I did bet them quite a bit early in the season. It's probably a live betting spot, just like last week. If the Seahawks get down, I don't know if you can make those live totals high enough. It is a very fun offense, but if it ends up being Seattle getting a lead, the Rams could be just dead in the water. You're right, Eric.
Yeah, like you, Andy. I didn't realize how high I had the Rams rated as well. I actually have the Rams as a better team than Seattle. And coming off the bye, and I took the Rams -1.5 here. I think that was Monday morning. So, the bye, and Seattle's defense has not been that great, but I think the Rams. I don't even know where they've been so good. I wasn't that high on them going into the season, but I feel like they've been good in terms of play success stuff. But I actually got. I faded Seattle. I found some futures. I bet both the Rams and the Cardinals going into last week for the NFC West. Seattle was priced at something like -275 or something like that, or maybe it wasn't that high. But it was. I was like getting 5-1 on each of those, or something around 5-1, which seemed kind of ludicrous to me. And so, I just am not as high on Seattle as everybody else is, I guess. And part of that's probably because they're not the same team they were in previous years in terms of their offense philosophy. They're much more aggressive and better, and I'm probably a little slow to react to that. But and obviously, I mean, their ceiling with Russell Wilson is much higher than the Rams with Jared Goff. But at the same time, the Rams have been one of the top few teams in terms of how they played this season so far. So even after controlling for strength of schedule, and I know they played some easy opponents.
Yeah, that's the only thing probably dragging them down is strength of schedule. They had the best week. They probably had the best week of everybody. They get to rest and their entire division lost. So it helps any futures you had went up in value without doing a thing. But unless this number gets ludicrous the other way, I'll probably stay off it.
Do you guys see this as a possibility to look like the game that Seattle played against San Francisco just 2 weeks ago, where you kind of have two teams that, on a good day, I think LA and San Francisco are among the best teams in the league, but like when they don't execute on offense, they simply can't keep up with Seattle's offense, right? And so you're almost banking on Seattle's defense to be uniformly awful the way that they were last week against Buffalo, but like defense catches breaks, right? And Goff is, one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL when under pressure, and like it has been one quarterback that has always bucked the trend of oscillatory nature under pressure. Like he's uniformly bad there. And when you depend so much on the brilliance of a play caller, much like San Francisco and LA do, if your players don't execute, it just leaves an opening for an offense that is extremely good in Seattle. And generally speaking, offense can, I think wins these sort of closer games more often than defense does.
Right, what we got next? Sorry, we got San Francisco 49ers at the New Orleans Saints. Double-digit favorite on the Saints at -10. Looks a little too big for most. The market could drop down on this one, maybe. The total is currently sitting at 49.5. No idea really what's happened to the 49ers. The Saints are getting better, getting the easiest cover of the season last week. I know you were on them, Rufus. Are you on them again this week?
Not yet. I'm looking to make sure. No, I mean, I make the line 10.5. I have the Saints as the class of the NFL right now. But I've been high on San Francisco too this year, despite the injuries. I mean, I think when you have Kyle Shanahan as a play caller, you can cover up a lot of deficiencies. But no, I don't have a position here. If anything, I'll take the under.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I'm not even going to tell you what to make this game because I don't have a great way to adjust for this many injuries. So it's my spreadsheet's going to say to bet the Niners, and I'm probably going to avoid that. Even with the upgrade I gave New Orleans, again, same thing I said with Tampa. I'm trying not to go nuts with the upgrade, but boy, that offense just looks smooth with all those receivers back. And people, those receivers back, and you still have Kamara, who's essentially a receiver. Like they have 5 good receivers. Taysom Hill is kind of a threat. What did Chris say when he had? Or I don't remember who said. Somebody said it when he had the ball. Just the most intimidating runner heading down the field. Like he is kind of a huge dude coming at you. And like I don't want to say that
he looks like Alex Jones guy walking through a slightly left-leaning restaurant, doesn't he, when he runs the ball?
Yeah, he's a big dude. Like it's funny how the jokes have been all year and everyone rags on Peyton for using him, but then he scores a couple touchdowns and everybody softens a little. Maybe they finally figured out how to use him properly. So I'm not taking the Saints at this big of a number. Probably looking at live betting it under in this if we get some goofy fireworks early. Could be similar to Green Bay, San Francisco, hopefully without the stupid backdoor over bet or over touchdown at the end.
I think it's San Francisco or nothing for me, but I have to look at the injuries. I do think San Francisco matches up well in their best form against New Orleans because I think their cornerbacks are athletic, their linebackers are good in coverage, and they do get a decent amount of pressure, just with 4 up front. The problem is all the COVID-related things are unknown. There are 2 wide receivers that they were out the other day with Samuel and Ayuk. There are question marks here, so it's sort of it's the exact thing that Ben was asking earlier in the podcast, which is like, are you going to lay off of this game because of COVID? I think that this is like the perfect game where COVID-related things are probably the reason you wouldn't bet it.
Right, now we got the LA Chargers at Miami Dolphins. I think this one's going to bounce around a fair bit. Opened at -3 on Miami, down to -2.5. Could go straight back to the 3. A couple of points off the total as well. It was listed at 50, down to 48. That one looks pretty split at the moment. It's probably an interesting one to analyze from a betting perspective. It's also an interesting matchup with the 2 young quarterbacks. As Andy, you were kind of talking about it earlier, a bit of hype now building around Tua. Decent overall game for him against the Cardinals. Eric, is he encouraging? Less than encouraging? More than encouraging? Is he good enough to get them to cover the spread here?
I bet them in a teaser with the other 2, the Indianapolis and the Houston, earlier in the week. I think the game will be close. They're always close with the Chargers. So I don't know necessarily if I can get there at +2.5, although you could probably get an expensive 3. I think both quarterbacks are extremely encouraging. I think Herbert's probably the better one at this point, and almost worth buying into. The problem is I think the Miami Dolphins in my coach play caller rankings, offensive play caller, I think they're ranked somewhere like 3 right now with Chan Gailey, and then they're first on defense. So they're getting just more than the sum of the parts, I think, all across the team, whereas the LA Chargers are almost doing the exact opposite. I mean, the LA Chargers are turning wins into losses, unlike any team we've seen, other than maybe the Falcons. So this one's tough for me. I do think that maybe 48 and the over is a decent play, though.
I'll probably have them in a teaser. Even as much as I like Miami, and I made them, I bet them last week, and when we talked about the fourth quarter heroics or lack of for the other team by Denver, and how that probably wasn't predictive, and it was just a fun narrative, and it hits the media hard. The same thing, the Chargers thing, where they have all these double-digit leads that evaporate, and they lose these games in heartbreaking ways. I think that is like semi-predictive, and it's predictive in the sense of they don't have a very good coaching staff, and they're not managing games right. And I'm probably gonna put the Chargers in the teaser. It's funny to say like 48's a low total because it's not, but it's lower. Like I'm more than happy to have a Chargers as a teaser leg in a game that's under 50 in this sort of year. Mild lean towards Chargers, so I like him as a teaser leg. It's a tough travel spot. It's a bad coaching staff. I love Miami, but I'm going to go with the numbers and probably play a little Wong teaser there.
I got absolutely nothing here. I make it minus 2.4.
No worries.
I'm at like 1.6.
All right, well, I'll move us on. We've got Baltimore Ravens at the New England Patriots. Probably a move that was always coming, but minus 6.5 to minus 7.5 on the Ravens. The total's gone from, is it up? What's it on now? 43? 44. Gone up from 41, I think. Some of it's going to be reaction to the fact that the Patriots actually nearly lost to the Jets, but also I think it's the Ravens. I mean, they look like they're getting better. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. Are they actually getting better? They're still nowhere near last season. The passing struggles for Lamar, costly mistakes. It's still a poor Patriots team, though. So I think this number's probably right for a lot of people. Rufus, is this one where you're bang on it again, or is there value here?
No, so I actually see a little bit of value in New England here. I make the number 5. Obviously, it wasn't the Patriots' best game last week. They, ranked 20th in game grades, and the Jets actually broke through into the top half. I think they're probably their first game grade in the with a number that didn't start with a 2 or a 3. So it actually is. They were the number 9 game grade. They -1 in turnovers. They had not a single 3 and out in the first half. I don't know how that happened with Flacco at quarterback, but I guess when you protect him, yeah. But I mean, this is I still expect the Patriots to be able to cobble together a game plan and to be able to maximize the talent they have. They've done that for a long time, and obviously they don't have the most talented roster, but the Ravens, they played well last week, but the Ravens have not been an offensive juggernaut this year. They've definitely shown some weaknesses. So it's not a strong play, but I do side with the Patriots here.
And Eric, I mean, interested to see what you think of the odds here, but also what your kind of ratings are looking like with Lamar and what's going on with him.
Yeah, Lamar has been not particularly good. I mean, when you look at, let me find his. Okay, he's only been accurate on 73.6% of his passes. So if you throw out drops and throwaways, he's one of the least accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. EPA per play, they're barely above 0 throwing the football because he's fumbling some. He's throwing some interceptions, but he's also simply not being efficient. And he has more turnover-worthy plays than big-time plays, which, again, is not a recipe for success. Against New England, I think a lot of it depends upon if Gilmore's back, because they're on defense legitimately bad if you don't, have your best corner. But in this game, it might not matter because, Baltimore, aside from tight end and Hollywood Brown, are not good on the outside. So I kind of like New England here because, I think Cam Newton found something the other day with Jacoby Myers and Damiere Byrd. They're a lot better offense than I think people are giving them credit for moving forward here.
And Andy, what are your thoughts?
I made no adjustment on the Patriots off the game last night, and truthfully, it was like a bad game. I don't know how much I feel about Cam playing well. Like, what was his average depth of target? I can't imagine it was it was just all short stuff against a bad team. I didn't really think that highly of Cam. Like the best thing Cam ever did was the dive or whatever the quarterback sneak. He's been great at that for 2 decades. He hasn't even played that long, but yeah, the quarterback sneaks and the run for the touchdown, those were great, but everything else was just short. I agree with you. Somebody had to pick up the slack. I mean, someone has to catch the passes, even if it is short. I made this 7.7. I bet on the openers. I took -6.5 at a cheap number. I really like the adjustments that Baltimore made in the second half, and I agree that the offense isn't what it was last year. Remember, every week we'd think about how many times you've seen the John Rahm hole-in-one now on Twitter, like in the last couple hours. Like that's what it was one time. I watched it a bunch. Everybody posts it now. But that's what it was last year. Everybody would post this amazing run by Lamar every single week where he'd do like multiple spin moves. The offense is not what it was last year. But at the same time, I rate them as a whole much higher. It sucks with some of these injuries, and maybe I'm not adjusting enough for, Campbell, the offensive lineman, and the defense played pretty well though. I think so. Humphrey out, Campbell hurt, and then Fort was out, and they still held a team to 10 points that scored 40 the week before. Not that I have high things to say about Phillip, but I think this team can get it done against a lower level team. That's kind of what we've seen this year. They struggle against some of the better teams, but against a lower level team like this, they should be able to do things. I'm not upgrading Cam much yet.
Yeah, he's just not producing turnover worthy plays though, which I think is
that's big. Yeah.
That to me, I think his average depth to target 7.25. They're not throwing the ball downfield, and their expected points per pass are bad. But I think a lot of that has to do with weapons. And, last night, I think was a step in the right direction for their weapons, though.
Where's he teeing off from that hole-in-one? Doesn't look like he's on the tee box.
He's not even inside the markers, I don't think, which doesn't count.
All right, then. Last game we got on the slate, Minnesota Vikings playing the Chicago Bears. This one's as you were as it opened at Pinnacle. Traders posted it -2.5 on Minnesota, 44.5 point total, just hasn't budged. Andy, I'll go to you. I think maybe Minnesota, is it a case of just left it a little too late? You were talking about the run game earlier. It's two teams that are really going in the opposite direction, I guess. Is the Vikings the obvious player, or is there more to it than that?
This is wanting to go to 3, and I would probably take some Bears in a 3 or Bears in a teaser here at home. They're not cutting the grass at all. They're going to let this grow out. Not that it's growing that much this time of year, but I don't think we continue to see Dalvin Cook just run for 200 yards a game. This is a good defense. It's a top 5 defense and a bottom 5 offense, and you're probably going to end up with an 8-8 team. And they were 5-1, and they were obviously a very false 5-1. 5-4 now, a home dog. This is the number that I probably have the furthest off outside of the San Francisco number that makes no sense. Like this game, I make basically a pick 'em, not quite. Minnesota -0.5. Like I'm going to play the Bears somehow, some way. It might be a teaser and a money line if it gets to a decent price 3, because I can see Minnesota money entering the market based off the expectations based on the last 2 weeks. But it could sell high spot for Minnesota, buy low on the Bears. And for some reason, I don't know if this is actually predictive, but man, Minnesota sucks so bad in Chicago. They're so bad at Soldier Field historically, even against bad Bears teams. So I don't know what you guys make it.
The Bears, if the Bears run another second and long, I don't know what I'm going to do.
The play calling, that's what I'll bet it, and the play calling will literally kill me on Monday.
It's uncanny. I mean, and they do it no matter what the distance is. 2nd and 1, they run out of shotgun to Montgomery. 2nd and 7, 2nd and 17, they do the same thing. So Minnesota has a relatively explosive offense, even in the passing game. I think if you're going to bet the Bears here, you're betting their defense. You're betting on their defense, which is a touchy one to me. So I'd probably go Minnesota or nothing, despite how much pain the Vikings have caused me in the past.
The Bears have no basically zero deep vertical game. The intermediate passing game is bad. That's what we've seen. But if they can, Minnesota's pressure, if Minnesota's pressure isn't there and Foles is clean against a bad secondary, this might be the one game where you see that come back and it's not terrible. Like, this is the ultimate get right formula for a team who can't pass intermediate or deep, is a very beat up secondary, and they have some decent receiving options. Honestly, 2 really decent tight ends and 2 pretty good receivers. And you look at the score, and they lost, and it wasn't particularly close. It was garbage points, but Tannehill was like 10 for 21. They just need to clean up a few things, and it's not a terrible team. It's an outside playoff team. I think they're the most penalized team now too. So as much as we were on the Nagy train a couple years ago, boy, I've left that train in the distance.
It's honestly one of the most perplexing things. Nagy did such a great job at Trubisky in 2018, and since then he's gone about proving everybody that he can't win with a medium quarterback. That's basically been like the stance he's taken as a play caller since. So
spot on the side, Rufus. Is there anything on the total of interest?
I'll unmute myself. No, nothing of interest to me there. I have it like 43 or so. So nothing.
And that's where it might be a teaser. It's a lower total, and the Bears play calling.
Did you say? Okay, teasing the side, not the total, right? Okay, just making sure.
Not in this house of worship.
Yeah.
No, in this house we don't do that.
All right, well let's
no teasing.
let's call it a day for that. I mean, it's good to be back. Good to be running through the Pinnacle numbers again, and our expert guests, Andy, Eric, and Rufus. A pleasure as always.
Rupert.
Thank you very much. You can get to the Masters now. Enjoy week 10, but enjoy the golf as well. Thanks, guys.
Good luck, guys.
Will do. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ben.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. All of the odds that we've discussed on today's show are available on pinnacle.com. Good luck with any bets, and remember to always gamble responsibly.